Welcome back to the second episode of From Me to You. For the second episode, we are visited by Shenay and Kirk, who are both heavily involved in community engagement. In this episode, we hear them share their stories about what community engagement looks like during this time, why they're passionate about doing community engagement work, and what drives them to be there and show up for their communities. I want to thank you, Shenay and Kirk, for being here today for the second episode of From Me to You. I just want to start the episode by having you both introduce yourselves, so you can just share your name, your positions, pronoun, and just anything, if you're in school or anything else you want to share for us to get to know you a little bit better. So whichever one would like to start can go ahead.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jordan, for having me. My name is Shenay Jeffrey. I serve as the Assistant Director for the Office of Pittsburgh. I use the she and her pronouns. I'm also a doctoral student in the School of Education in the EDD program, and I'm really excited to be here. And I'm also a Pitt alum, so happy to be here.
All right, and hello, everyone. My name is Kirk Holbrook, and I'm the Director of Pitt's Community Engagement Center in the Hill District. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a Hill District resident, and I've been in this position at the University of Pittsburgh for close to 3 years.
Yes, thank you. So obviously we already see the connection here in terms of community engagement. So I just want to jump in right away and ask, what has community engagement? And I was going to say last year, but really we see that we're still in this pandemic. What does community engagement look like for you all in this past year and a half, if you will, and how has it changed a little bit?
Yeah. I'll let Kirk start.
So I think I'll start with the second question first. I think clearly engagement has changed because we are now in a virtual reality. So we are connecting with our neighbors, with our stakeholders, with our partners through this digital highway. And I think that has, created its own challenges, but also its own opportunities. I think that engagement, what it looks like now, it still is meeting the needs of the folks that we serve. But I think in a lot of ways, we are more focused on meeting critical needs. And this digital highway that we are on due to this virtual reality allows us to connect maybe even more often than we would in a personal environment. I feel like there are a lot of Zoom calls and Zoom sessions that are happening all the time. And it seems like, I can speak for a lot of folks that I've been in conversation with, our calendars are even more packed than they were pre-pandemic. But I think community engagement in this pandemic has allowed us and our work here at the Community Engagement Center to be even more effective at attaching to critical need and also being more effective at being a connecting partner. So we've been able to bring all of our partner groups, all our residential groups together. We've been a convener, and I think there's been a lot of collective action in this time as well.
And I would agree with all of that. I would also add that this past year has really taught us how connected we are to our humanity and to each other. And this is something, a core fundamental principle that people like Kirk and I and other community engagement professionals, we've known this. So I think this has really highlighted that work in a very interconnected way, right? We do have to care about each other. We do have to care where we live, how we grow up, what access we have or don't have. And these are fundamental principles for community engaged work. So as a field, I would say, these are things we've known, but the times that we've lived in recently has really highlighted that work, I think, for people that may have not have known that. So in the sense, it's been the same, but also different.
So I just kind of want to build off of that question and backtrack a little bit to know for both of you, and we can start with Shenay, is your why. Why do you do community engagement work and why is it meaningful to you? And you can pull in what you do now, but if you have past things that you've done that has made this meaningful, I would want you to share that as well.
Yeah, this is a very important question for me, and I think about it a lot, definitely more so recently, but the reason I do this work, it's because it's linked to my survival. It's linked to people that look like me. I am a woman, I'm a Black woman, I am an immigrant. These are fundamental things that I've experienced and shared with others, and they're experiences that I'm learning from too. So for me, it's very much linked to personal values, personal experiences, but also in a space where I know that I can be some part of a systematic change. So, with that being said, I've had experiences that kind of led me to a point where my passion areas can be exemplified. So, around immigrants, around young people, and around women, especially Black women. So, I've been a part of organizations and different nonprofit boards that really do that work deeply. And I'm really grateful to have a chance to do that work here at the University of Pittsburgh, working with primarily undergrad students in helping them develop those passion areas too.
And Jordan, I also think that's a great question. And so I got my community engaged experience as a University of Pittsburgh student 20 years ago. So at the age of 20, in the year 2000, I was a work study tutor, and I got a position working with young people at a local church in the after school program as a tutor. And I was a young person from a minority community, all Black community in Wilkinsburg, who had some difficulty dealing with some of the pressures in a community like Wilkinsburg or like the Hill District, and had some of my trajectory as a young man be impacted by that. And so through working with young people in that after school program, I saw that I could help forge a path ahead for myself by helping young people not fall in the same traps that I did when I was growing up. So it was real personal for me because it gave me what I often say was a second shot of life, second chance in life. And by realizing that I could help young people who came from communities like mine, I realized that I could find a passion and something that I could dedicate my life to. So my work on community engagement started with focusing on Black and brown children in inner city communities, specifically related to education, and seeing education attainment, positive education attainment, as a protective factor to some of the pressures that exist in neighborhoods like mine. That passion then grew and expanded to issues around public education, community organizing, politics, but it all is rooted in helping to foster transformational change so that young people will be able to reach their full potential, and that our communities won't have aspects to them that can really hinder a young person's growth. And I think you need people that have those very real lived experiences doing this type of work to actually change the environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also want to ask you specifically, Kirk, because you've done work in the Hill District before prior to being at the University of Pittsburgh in this capacity, but understanding that the Hill District CEC for short is brand new, like what has that been like trying to do that, and then adding on top the pandemic and not being able to like be as close and physically in person with a lot of people, like what does that look like as you continue to build up the Hill District CEC?
Right. Well, I think a big part of opening up and building up the Hill District CEC was not shying away from the history between Pitt and the Hill District, and the history that hasn't always been positive, right? There's been a challenging history. There has been a history where the university has expanded its boundaries without much care to what that means to the local community. There's a history of one-sided relationships and partnerships that's not unique to the Hill District and Pitt, but definitely is very prevalent in this past history. And so a lot of that initial engagement was around building trust, not shying away from that history, but helping folks to see that there could be a new relationship that could be mutually beneficial, and really focusing on the benefit to the community first and second, right? And really kind of shifting the paradigm by which universities traditionally engage in Black communities or adjacent communities. So that was a big part of our work early on. I think the pandemic oddly enough, has really helped strengthen the perception of folks in the Hill District related to our Community Engagement Center and how we can be and have become a true partner. At the very beginning of this pandemic, I was responsible for convening what became known as the Monday phone call, where we had over 30 different organizations and residents convening every Monday to try to develop ways that we could all work together, even beyond our respective organizations' missions, to meet the needs of the people that we care about and love. And being central to that body that was meeting every week, again, elevated the fact that we have now transitioned into a space where the Pitt Community Engagement Center in the Hill District is a partner, that we're moving in lockstep with our other partners, our other stakeholders, and our other organizations in the community. And so, again, it's one of those silver linings where, because we have been relentless in our community engaged work, even in a remote environment, even in the midst of a pandemic, we have really solidified our role as a partner within the neighborhood.
Wow, that's powerful. And I think bringing up that history and understanding how we are moving forward to not only build a relationship, but at first we're people. So you walking into that role, having had background in the Hill District, but also being able to, acknowledge that history is an important step with that work. Now, I wanted to shift to Shenay, because coming into 2020, you and the Office of Pitt Serve really had to rethink how you'd be able to send students on buses. When you think about Pitt Make a Difference Day, that's a whole thing to tackle just in itself. So, what was the initial conversations that happened when we realized that we weren't going to be able to do those large events? And then how did you all overcome that? So just share a little bit about that.
This is just such a great question. Because I think we're going to be answering it for years to come. So really, like everyone else, we were very uncertain what the future would hold. So for us, it was, how can we adapt and shift in a times where, we don't even know what a couple months would look like? Because as everyone else, we plan and prep months in advance. So with that being said, what we held core to us was that we know that community engagement, civic engagement, service is going to be at the core of all of this. And we saw that very early on in the pandemic. So with that being said, our office right off the bat worked with Kirk's office with the CECs and really came together to pull together resources into the Pitt Pandemic Service Initiative. So that was one way we started to reshift and be flexible in our approach, is obviously working more closely, because we already work with so many offices, but work very closely with as an institution of how we would respond. In terms of our students, we really started to rethink, as you mentioned, our large days of service. And, as anyone would know who's watching this, Pitt Make a Difference Day is a huge one. And that has about, close to 5,000 students that are registered and over 100 projects. And these are like school buses all on one day going to all these different parts. So obviously we couldn't convene 5,000 people during a pandemic. So the way we rethought that is really to think about, and this pandemic, I think, honestly, has given us, as Kirk mentioned, an opportunity in many ways to rethink our positionality in our messaging and also our purpose. So it really gave our office a time to pause and think about, how do we still convey the messages of our core fundamental values, as well as, present something that's safe and that can reach multitude of people. So, coming together with several offices, including the Community and Governmental Relations Office, we rethink a lot of how our big events are going to be displayed. And we came up with Civic Action Week, which was a week-long engagement strategy to really showcase and encourage people to collaborate and think about the different impacts that we have together. And we did this through the Civic pathways of engagement. So it basically says that there's several ways that you can get engaged beyond just a direct service opportunity, which is what we typically had done in the past. So instead, you can also, volunteer in a soup kitchen and so on, and those are important, but also getting involved in your political structures, philanthropy structures, activism structures, those are also equally important. So we elevated that message more than we have in the past during this time. And I think this past year has really given us an opportunity to rethink our messaging and to make it more inclusive, but also broader in how we think about service and how we think about community engagement.
Yes. And it basically, from what I'm hearing from both of you, is that pandemic or not, the community engagement work does not stop. And it is even heightened because there's more needs during this pandemic. So that's important. So even if you're not a Pitt student, you have the ability to go and help others and do community service, but making sure that it's purposeful and making sure you're understanding the purpose and what you're doing it for. So my last question before I let you all share some advice is, I wanted to give you the space to talk about some of the things that you do outside of Pitt, so the organizations that may be meaningful to you and the work that you do with those organizations. So you can share a little bit about those, and then I will let you all give your advice to the audience.
So I guess I can start, Shenay. So, Jordan, I talked about my story and how I got involved in community engaged work and how that really started with working with young people, Black and Brown students and Black and Brown communities around education, and seeing education as a protective factor in a young person's trajectory. And what I mean by that is, we know there's been so many studies, if a young person is not reading on grade level by the third grade, right, there's future tells for their graduation rates and other things that may happen in adulthood. If a young person has not enrolled in algebra by the 8th grade, there's future tells for what their success is going to be in high school and their ability to get into college. And so that passion, again, is at the root of all of my work. And I currently serve on the Equity Advisory Panel for the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And the Equity Advisory Panel is an advisory body that specifically looks at the education of Black students in Pittsburgh Public Schools and measures growth in education achievement, disparities in suspensions, enrollment in gifted classes. And this Equity Advisory Panel it's a 7-body panel. It was created in 2007 after a 15-year litigation of a lawsuit that was filed in 1992 by the Advocates for African American Students, who were a group of parents led by Dr. Barbara Sasmore, who used to be a University of Pittsburgh professor, who were really looking at these glaring disparities and growing disparities in the education attainment of Black students in Pittsburgh, filed a lawsuit against Pittsburgh Public Schools. And then after 15 years, the Office of Equity was created and this Equity Advisory Panel was created. So this is a group where I spend a lot of work on working with the leaders and the original members of the panel and learning from their strategies, but also just really delving into educational policy a little more. And again, focusing on what educational policy means in terms of the success of Black students. And so that is the primary organization I wanted to highlight for work that I do outside of this role.
Yes. So for me, I will focus on 2 organizations that have really made an impact on me, especially during the time I've been in Pittsburgh. One being the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh. I was the past president of the Young Professionals chapter. And this is a group, an auxiliary group. And what that means, it's a group of young people that supports the mission and values of the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh. So it's a group of 21 to 40-year-olds that come together to engage in philanthropy, membership development, and service. And we do that all within supporting the mission of enabling African Americans to achieve self-reliance, parity, and power. So that is the mission of the Urban League. So we all do that towards that goal. So this is an organization that is very dear to my heart. I've been in it for over 5 years, And it's a great space to come together to build community, especially after you graduate. You're looking for a social group or things like that. So it's a great group of young Black professionals in the city that come together to engage in various ways. And that includes through service as well. The second group that I'll highlight is New Voices for Reproductive Justice. So New Voices actually was founded, the founders went to Pitt and over 15 years ago. And they are a phenomenal group of people, an organization, really kind of the mantra is, for Black women, led by Black women. So, and this is supportive of Black women, as well as anyone identify as a Black woman. So with that being said, in the kind of space of reproductive justice, and reproductive justice is basically the philosophy that, the choices we make as women, especially Black women, on our bodies and for our families is directly related to these external factors, or access to healthcare, access to healthy food, access to education. So we have to invest in those structures. And it's a huge pipeline, right? Because it affects the Black family and it affects the Black woman. And it's a choice in choosing what we do with our bodies. So with all of that said, the spectrum of different things I was able to get involved with, being a part of that group has spanned the gamut. A lot of policy work. For me, it was very interesting and rewarding to learn more about incarcerated women, especially Black incarcerated women, and when those women are pregnant, and the anti-shackling bill. So to have that pass with the work of New Voices was really rewarding. And then different engagement strategies. Most recently, we, engaged thousands of Black women in voting processes. We're setting up a 501c4. So it's really shown me the power of Black women in the political space and what that can look like for our landscape and especially for our choices. So those are two groups that have been very dear and near to my heart that I wanted to highlight, and it's very linked to community and the community engaged work.
Yes, thank you both for all of the work that you do. I think it is important. And I think that this will allow other people to know and understand about, just in the city of Pittsburgh, at least, what is available for people to get involved in and what causes are actually, what causes are important. So now I just want you both, and we can start with Kirk, to just share a piece of advice. So for whether it's fellow people that are in community engaged work or people that want to become in community engaged work. So just share a piece of advice for anyone out there that is watching.
So I think my piece of advice is going to be more about, some advice around choosing what you want to do with your life's work. And so from me to you, I advise you to find something that you're passionate about. Find something that gives you purpose instead of solely focusing on profit. I think we are conditioned quite often from a very young age to try to find a life's path that'll lead to the greatest riches possible. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more rich than doing work that serves people and makes a difference. The profit will eventually come if you find your passion first. So from me to you, find your passion.
And from me to you, I would say start local, start with your community. Any change that you're looking to affect, it really does start, with those around you and in the environment that you're in, and even within yourself. So I would say do the work internally. Also, this community engaged work is so rewarding. And you have to have a passion for people, a love for people. So make sure that you have this criteria, but also know that, there's a lot of great work already happening. And if you're looking to start your involvement, definitely start to see what's around you and how you can make a difference starting locally.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And I just want to say that was great pieces of advice. Once after I graduate, I'm going to definitely look into some of the organizations that you're a part of as I'm in education. So thinking about what that looks like for me. But I just wanted to thank you both for being guests here today on From Me to You. I think that there's a lot of important aspects of what you all spoke about today that a lot of viewers will be able to take away. So I just wanted to thank you both for being here today and taking the time out to spend with me at least, but also for everyone else that will be watching.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan.